Hello, this is Tran. For our Unit 1 Poetry Research assignment, I have chosen to analyse and discuss in depth Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken from the Mountain Interval. In this video, I'll be covering Robert Frost as a prominent 19th century poet and his association with Romanticism, influencing factors in his composition of the poem and the significance of each of the four stanzas and their contribution to the overriding message of the poem. To begin, Robert Frost was an American born in San Francisco in 1874. Robert Frost had a profound interest in poetry for the majority of his early life. However, it was not until 1912 that he had pursued poetry as a profession, in moving to London and beginning to publish his poems. 4 years later, in 1916, Frost composed the poem titled The Road Not Taken as a way of poking fun of his close poet friend Edward Thomas. It was common for the two to take strolls through the countryside and through forests, wherever the road took them, engaging in deep conversation that covered topics from politics to arts. In his recitals of The Road Not Taken, Frost would comment that Thomas was a person who, whichever road he went, would be sorry he didn't go the other. Romanticism was an artistic movement that began in the mid-18th century, reaching its peak just decades before Frost was born in the 19th century. The key traits of Romanticism include the way that it savours the arts and shows affection for nature, in addition to embracing the emotional side of oneself. Robert Frost considered himself a romantic, and his poems are known for its authenticity of voice and unique, positive and gentle view of nature, aligning with the same fundamental ideas. Before analysing the poem itself, I'd like to recite it. The Road Not Taken. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both. And be one traveller, long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could, to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear. Though as for the passing there, had warned them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves, no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less travelled by, and that has made all the difference. The Road Not Taken is a narrative poem that creates a clear image of the scene for the audience in the rhyme scheme A-B, A-A-B. The number of syllables in each stanza doesn't adhere to any strict structure, which allows for the poem to feel natural and like a conversation that follows the spontaneous thoughts of the narrator. The first stanza of the poem employs 9 syllables in each line, which provides a sense of calmness before the narrator's problem arises and an internal conflict occurs which sees the number of syllables vary from 8 to 10 per line in the remainder of the poem. In the first stanza, the audience is greeted with an image of the predicament faced by the narrator, having to choose between 2 paths. In the very first line, Frost uses the words yellow wood. Besides setting the scene and informing the audience that the events occur in autumn, Frost chooses the colour yellow as it symbolises the narrator's cowardice and his inability to quickly make a choice and not fear regret. In the second line, sorry I could not travel both, indicates that the narrator wishes that he could take both roads and derive the benefits of both worlds. The third line, and be one traveller, long I stood, introduces the audience to the narrator's problem, that he is unable to make a decision without fearing that the path that he forgoes has the possibility to be better than the one that he chooses. The second stanza sees the narrator scrutinize the 2 paths and continue to be conflicted with the same problem of having to choose one over the other, and possibly miss out on something great in doing so. In the beginning, the second stanza seems to indicate that one path has the better claim than the other because it was grassy and wanted wear, using personification to build the narrator's voice and implicate a conversational tone to the poem. However, in the final line of the stanza, the narrator concludes that the 2 paths were really about the same. In writing this stanza, Frost attempts to further highlight the narrator's indecisiveness and that perhaps the narrator has tried to convince himself that his choice is the correct one and pacify the thought of losing out on the other path. The third stanza of the poem is the last to describe the two paths and serves the purpose of summing up the decisions that have to be made by the narrator, and builds upon the first two stanzas to further establish that there is no difference in the two paths. This is indicated in the first and second line. In the third line, the narrator sarcastically says that he has kept the first for another day, implicating that he intends to come back and get to see the other path's sights, yet doubts that he should ever come back in the fifth line. Use of sarcasm in the third stanza not only allows for Frost to build upon the narrator's voice, but also shine light on the way that he lies to himself and attempts to convince himself that he is not giving up an opportunity, but rather saving it for another time. The final stanza of the poem immediately strikes to be different to its precursors in that it uses future tense in the words shall and hence, as opposed to the past tense form that had been adopted in the first three stanzas. Through use of alternating tenses, Frost draws focus to the way that people reminisce on past events. The use of the word sigh in the first line leaves the poem open to subjectivity, as it doesn't specify whether the sigh was positive or negative. In the final two lines of the poem, the audience once again sees the narrator trying to reassure himself of his decision in saying that choosing the road less travelled made all the difference, when in reality the two paths were virtually the same. It is also essential that the stutter with the word I is not overlooked in the third line, as it indicates the narrator's apprehension in trying to convince himself that the paths were different and that he is making the right decision. When the final stanza is read in isolation, it is easy to misinterpret the poem. In looking at the final two lines, it seems to strike as a warning against conformity and not following the flock, so to speak, glorifying the benefits of walking one's own path. However, when read as a whole, it is clear that the roads were the same, and the poem is about the narrator's salient fear of foregoing the benefits of the road not taking, impeding his ability to make a decision at all. In fact, the whole poem is Robert Frost warning the audience not to let their fear of regret stop them from taking action in life. Frost pushes his audience to have the courage to work with the limited information they have, to make decisions that allow them to move on with life rather than stand still at the fork in the road. Thank you.